So anyway, I bought put all my, I guess it was 50,000 into Coachman at 5, and I went on margin. That is to say, I borrowed money from the brokers, and in a year it went from 5 to like 25, and because of the margin I was on, it moved me up about tenfold from 50,000 to close to 500,000. And that was enough for me to say, I want to go on my own, but I need enough money to live on. And I said 500,000 should do it. At that time, the prices were low, so I figured that I could live for, I don't know. I think my memory is I said if I make 5% on 500,000, we're talking about 25,000 a year. That's enough for me to live on. I know it wouldn't be today, but this was 19. Well, actually, I left the firm on very good terms. Great firm, Capital Research. I have nothing but praise for that company. On April Fool's Day of 1977, and so that was an interesting thing. As far as the conversation with Coachman, one of the big issues was wage and price controls. And what they said was, among other things, is for the first time in that year, which would have been uh, early 1975, they were allowed by the government to raise prices sufficient to cover their increasing costs. So they no longer were squeezed in terms of from government bureaucracy. And that, of course, was what had been one of the big reasons why so many of the stocks in the RV industry were were down in the previous couple of years. A second area of conversation was very important that we had energy price controls, and like one reason that the stocks had gone down so much is that it used to be like in 1970 or something, before the weight and price controls and the energy issue. Uh, let's say grandmother is saying, I'd like to spend some time with the grandkids. What are you thinking? And her husband says, well, what about I get a travel trailer or a big one, and we'll, take the couple grandkids. There's enough for them to stay, so on and so forth, and we'll have a chance to. Great, says the grandmother. But once you had energy prices go up and you had shortages because of wage and price controls, when the grandfather is saying, hey, what if I buy an RV? We could go and so on and so forth. She said, dear, we go to the next town 50 miles down the road. How do we know if we're going to be able to fill up with gas? You got to be crazy to buy an RV and with this energy situation and the price controls and shortages. They used to have lines of people trying to wait to buy gasoline. What happened was, I believe it was 1971, um, where there was enough production. So for the first time in the United States, domestic production couldn't. The demand was greater, and so up until that time, I think it was in Texas, some bureaucracy in Texas controlled the price of oil in the United States. Well, once they had to start importing significant amounts, which happened about that time, the people in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and so on and so forth, said, oh, now we are getting control of the price of oil, and so this was the start of what they called OPEC, which is still around, right? And the price of oil went. It'd be interesting to go back, but my guess was that it might have been 50 cents a barrel, and all of a sudden it goes to $2 a barrel, $5 a barrel, dramatic, big increases. And there was nothing the United States could do because they didn't produce enough themselves within the country to handle all the demand. And that, as I'm saying, was a big issue for companies like recreational vehicle that depended on easy access to gasoline. So all of those things, as I said, caused with my new tactic, a real opportunity. The stock, as I said, went from 5 to 25 coachmen in a year, and made me about, I had about $500,000. It was enough for me to go on my own, which I did. Well, being a gambler, if you like a stock and you want to say, okay, how do I make the maximum amount of money out of this? Let's say you've got $10,000. With almost every broker, you can say, look, I don't want to buy $10,000 worth of coachmen. I want to buy 15,000 and borrow 5,000 from you. And the brokers are happy to do that for two reasons. One, they can charge you for loaning you the 5,000, and second, the commissions are greater on doing the trades because we're talking about buying 15,000 rather than buying 10. And it's very common, still around, very much so, and so that is called in the financial sector, that's called margin, and that's what I did. I tend to do it. I do it to this day as a way of enhancing my return. This is a very important issue because there's so many people who think, oh, I'm going to speculate. I'm going to make good money, and maybe they find one stock that goes up and they're on margin. Great, I've doubled my money, and so I'll do it a second time. And then they get into a bear market, or they get into a situation where the stock starts going down. And that can lead you to total disaster. It led me not to total disaster, but a lot of volatility. For example, as I mentioned, in what would have been 1973 and 4, I ran 100,000, which I'd made in 1972, down to 50. And my guess is one of the reasons was I was on margin on a couple of the stocks that went down. So that is something you have to be concerned with. And this happened by the late 70s. I had a tactic on how to deal with that. As I say in my book, maybe the most important aspect of investing that I focus on is emotion. And what I mean by that mostly is my own emotion. And there's a common saying that the stock market is, based on emotions, the two emotions, fear and greed. Well, the greed, of course, is when the stock that you own goes up. But when you are on margin and the stock starts going against you, what happens? You start to be fearful. So what I would do, let's say I'm what I call 50%, 150% invested, which could be I have 10,000 of equity and I'm borrowing 5,000. So that I would call that 150% invested. And it starts going against me. Uh, then I had like a 3-day um, tactic. Let's say the first day it goes down, and so I say, okay, I'm going to go from 150% invested to 135, 30% invested. How do I do that? Only one way. I sell a chunk of the stock. Okay, and then I know in my mind, all right, now I'm roughly 130% invested. But let's say the second day it goes against me again. Then I say, okay, I was at 150% invested, now 130% invested. I'm going to go down to 115% invested. More selling. On that third day, if it goes down again, I say automatically, I'm off margin. I'm not going to owe anything. So I go from 115% invested to 100%.